Welcome to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Book. He is also the city commissioner for the city of Gainesville. I'm really looking forward to having him on the show. He has 40 years experience in law enforcement, so a wealth of knowledge. Welcome to the show, Chief Book. Thank you so much for being here today.
Of course, thanks for having me. I'm not sure I'm going to have a wealth of knowledge for you, but I'll certainly have hopefully a few nuggets of information.
Well, I'm actually really looking forward to it. I enjoyed our initial conversation, and I am going to beg to differ. I think that you are a wealth of knowledge, and I'm excited. So I was hoping that we could give a little bit of background. 40 years is a really long time to be in law enforcement. So give us a little bit of insight into who you are as a person and what your career looked like.
All right, I appreciate that. So I'm going to encapsulate 40 years in perhaps a minute because nobody wants to hear someone basically talk about everything that's happened in every moment of their lives. But I did, like many people, I was in college, met my wife there, and when I came out, I was thinking, how would I like to do something that would make a difference? The cliches that may come up as we speak, during your podcast are real cliches in law enforcement and public safety. You don't want a desk job? Try law enforcement. You want to make a difference? Try law enforcement. You want to help people? Get in public safety. And that's what I did. I came out of the University of Florida. I applied at the agency Gainesville Police Department, which is in North Central Florida. And to my surprise, I made it through the process. They hired me, and 26 years later, after doing many things there, I was able to retire because I got the chief's job at Santa Fe College Police Department, which is a higher education institution. Spent another 14 years, and here we are. Two great agencies, wonderful career, and still very passionate about law enforcement.
I love it. And you, I was laughing offline with you because you just retired from law enforcement, but now you work as an elected official for the city commissioner. And so I was laughing. I'm like, you didn't actually retire. You still have a job. But I want to talk a little bit about what that transition has been like for you. How did you prepare for the next chapter in your life?
Well, really, the good question there, Paige, is how do you wind down in a way that makes you happy and makes someone comfortable, makes your family happy, and that you feel very comfortable with that so that you can continue the next chapter? Because there's many things we do that are valuable. So, right, I have a couple of overlapping jobs. One of them was the chief at Santa Fe College. I just retire. That was a long time in planning with the college. And I have since turned over the badge. We had a swapping of the badges with my major, my second in command, Ryan Woods. And that was really exciting because part of planning a good exit strategy is providing good succession planning. And he made it through a very rigorous process, and he's now the chief. And here I am sitting in a different office thinking, what good hands that the
Mhm.
college is in and public safety in that higher education. So you really have to think. That kind of goes back to your question. Think ahead, and where do you want to be at those times? And what do you hope happens when you walk out? And what do you have ready to do when you walk out? Because you can't just sit in a recliner.
Yeah, I really like this idea of think ahead. I always say, what can we do today to make our future selves proud or our future selves happy? And it's almost this reverse engineering that has to happen. And I was just doing a briefing training. I was telling you a little bit about this offline, but I was just doing a briefing
Mm-hmm.
training, and in briefing, there's all ages, all levels, within the career. Some people who have been in the career 20 years, some people who are fresh, and there was one, I'll call him a kid, I think he was probably early 20s, and we were having this conversation about wellness and, being proactive. And he kind of made this comment of like, oh, I don't need to worry about that stuff. Now I have so much time. And I'm thinking back in my life of how fast time has gone by.
You're
And
not
if you,
kidding.
and if you don't think about these things now, if you don't have that foresight of, okay, what do I want my career to look like? What do I want my life beyond my career to look like? What do I want my family life to look like? If you could picture best case scenario in the future. And then we can have, that backwards thinking of, okay, well, what do we have to do to build that foundation today to prepare ourselves for tomorrow? I
Hmm.
think that we're going to blink and we're going to end up in that recliner saying, I wish I would have done these things earlier. I wish I would have set myself up. So I really like that idea of how can you think ahead? How can you prepare and plan so that when you do get there, you're all smiles.
Yeah, I don't know that I was that good at age 21 when I started as a young cop. So I could say 40 years later, think ahead and like you, what you talked about is basically special event planning, reverse engineering.
Mhm.
Start from where you want to be at the end of at the event. That's what's, I ran some football operations for the city, and we always started with here's the game. Now backtrack to where you're getting staffing and resource support and people and parking and logistics and retirement and kind of the end game for what do you want to be at the end is what you said, reverse engineering. But at age 21, I could tell you I was not there. I just wanted to be a cop. I
Mhm.
really wanted to be out on the road. I was very excited to do it. And fortunately, while there's always ups and downs in any career, you want there to mostly to be ups or you're in the wrong profession. And I can say in 40 years, maybe there's a bad day, a bad week, maybe even a bad month. But in 40 years, there's not many. And that's what makes public safety pretty rewarding. And when people enter that, they just need to realize you're in a profession that makes a difference.
Mhm.
You are. What you do matters. So if you start with that premise, you should feel pretty good with yourself. And then you figure out now, how can I be here for the long haul?
Yeah, I agree with you. You were probably way better off when you were in your early 20s than I was. I was a complete disaster. I had no foresight at all. And I'm not saying don't think for yourself. I
Mm-hmm.
think that, especially when I was younger, I was so like, my way or highway, you can't tell me what to do, and I'm going to think the way I think. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have your own personality. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have your own thoughts. I do think that there's a lot of value in learning from people who did it before you.
No doubt about that.
I'm
We're,
not
we're in
saying you have
100%
to take
agreement.
everything, but like listen to the people who are saying, hey, especially if it sounds like sound good advice, of like, hey, let's focus on these things early because I didn't do that and I wish I did. I think there's so much value in learning from people who are more experienced and who have done it already. When you were talking about, the game and how you prepare and for this event, I
Mm-hmm.
was also thinking about, I really compare first responders, especially law enforcement, as professional athletes. I think there's a lot of correlation. I think that you are professional athletes. I think that you have to be physically and mentally elite to do your job. And so I think about, you know, the Super Bowl, all these, like, think about all these young kids who get into sports when they're little, maybe it's Pop Warner or something like that, and
I
they're
did
like,
it with my kids, and I understand.
one day I want to be whoever it is at that time. Maybe some people are like, I want to be Tom Brady or I want to be, whatever, whoever that icon, that idol is for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, if you want to get there, what do we have to do today? You got to be able to do the sprints, the reps. You got to be able to hone in your game. You got to be able to think on your feet. You got to be able to tackle. You got to be whatever it is, within that function of that sport, you have to put in those reps early because there's no way that you're going to end up a famous quarterback playing in the Super Bowl if you don't put in the work today to get there proactively. So I
That
think
is right.
about that a little bit. It's like, what
Okay.
is your dream and how can we make it happen in a proactive way?
So you made some really good points, and I think really what you were talking about is you're preparing one step at a time. And maybe I'm not thinking 25 years ahead, but I'm thinking 6 months ahead, which is how am I a better law enforcement officer? How am I a better deputy? How am I a better police officer, a marshal? You a special agent, you name it, if you're in public safety. So we're in a profession. Law enforcement is a profession. So you start on ground, day one and ground zero
Mhm.
with number one, what do I need to know about the job? And that's most of the time it's basic. It may be even bookwork. It's statutes and ordinances. I have to know the law if I'm going to be out there limiting freedoms and utilizing law enforcement authority, which is substantial. So it's really, I think, step one for you, the prep in the job is you want to be good long term, be good short term,
Mhm.
which is I really need to eat the information up that's provided me. Listen to the sarge, listen to the lieutenant, look at the senior officers and say, do they have something to offer? Because they do. They have a tremendous amount to offer, but you got to be willing to listen. We're in a non-listening kind of society today. A lot of people think that they may know more, including myself, than we do. So you got to take, so that's the first thing is just understand the specifics of the job. And then a second piece for preparing for the long haul is really have a good have a good core. Show integrity, show ethics. Don't compromise those for anything. If you have a good moral center, that's really important for public safety. Those two things, understanding the nature of the job and making sure you're not compromising integrity, ethics, being professional in a profession, you're set for the first year or two. And then you get in there and you think, okay, now what am I looking to do? Do I want to be a specialty or a canine or a detective? Or do I want to, ascend, promote? So I think you made some good points that you start with different pieces and then you move for what's the bigger picture.
Yeah, I would even take it a step further, and because I agree with you, and I think that if you also understand that in order to do all of those things, you have to be good physically and mentally. Like you
Very
have to
true.
be taking care of yourself. If you want to do all these things, you want to be really good at your job, you want to show up in your home life, your professional life, you want to be able to show up with integrity, a good attitude, all those things, you also have to be prioritizing your wellness along the way and what that looks like. So I'm on board with you, and I love everything you said. I wanted to ask you because you were in leadership for a
Can I
really
ask
long
one
time.
thing there,
Yeah.
Paige? I know you're the host, so I'm
Oh
not
gosh.
trying to interrupt
Okay.
your show, but you were talking about wellness, and I know the first Jevity deals quite a bit with wellness and providing kind of the holistic piece. How are you going to do well, feel good about what you do, be healthy, and I think that's really important. And I think that's really two big factors. It's how you approach the job. It's your own perspective and expectation, and saying, what can I do to make it better? That's a piece of wellness. And then the other part is how you're going to deal with the environment, that work environment around you. It's that nature versus nurture, and they're both very important. So I just think that you were kind of speaking to wellness and what we do, and I think that's really critical.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And ultimately, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. It's really interesting. And I think any career you're in, you have those moments where you look back and you're like, I cannot believe I did it that way, or I can't believe, how far I've come or how much I've learned. And when it comes to wellness, a few things that I've really learned is one, we have to meet people where they are. Like we have to understand that everybody is different and everyone is going to need different things. Everyone's going to learn in different ways. Everyone's going to receive information in different ways. And so this idea that there's a checkbox solution is not realistic. We have to be able to adapt and evolve and make everyone feel valued as an individual. And really at the core, I think of what we try to do is how can we create more nervous system regulation so that we can create more longevity? I think if we can start there, and we can try to stay level. You talked about ups and downs and how you want to have more ups and downs. And I really think, how can we, even in the downs, how can we have the ability to get back up so that we can keep going? How can we have the faith that there is light at the end of the tunnel? How can we have positive attitude through the hard times? How can we find the grit and the resiliency through it? And so I think, at the core of what we're talking about when we talk about longevity, it's that. It's like how can we create more resilience? And I think that at the core of a lot of it, not everything, obviously we start to get into financial and physical wellness, but at the core of a lot of it, it's like how can we have more nervous system regulation and kind of use that as a foundation to build on.
Yeah, I like what you said because that checkbox thing, that's right. We know there's all kinds of ways and support systems that can help us do a better job, feel better about our job, have longevity, but it's not the same for everybody because how we've been grown up, what our family structure has been is going to impact the way that we perceive
Hmm.
those things. So you're right. We know there's a suite of things. We know you have to have family support systems to do well in a career profession, especially law enforcement, where there's a lot of stressors, there's a lot of anxiety. You have to go from 0 to 100, not very often, but if you have to do it, you better have your A game on. And that's a stressful thing. It's crisis response. And so you have to know what are the support systems that you set up, and they are different for different people. And then maybe a financial piece, it could be a family structure piece, could be a mental health component, which I'm happy to say I don't see it having the stigma it had 20 and 30 years ago. If you need mental health service, go get it. And that's the terrific thing. And you come out of there with, I think you talked about, better recognition, better awareness of our weaknesses and strengths, and that makes us better.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I do want to kind of dive into some of those different pillars and get your insights on those.
Pillars is a good term. I like that.
Yeah, I think that there's more pillars than we think. I think that we've just scratched the surface. The more conversations I have in this podcast, I'm like, ooh, that's a pillar. And then, ooh, like that's a pillar too, and maybe we can lump them, into like main categories, but I think that, to your point, it's multidimensional. There's a lot of different ways that we can look at this. And I think that if we're going to recognize that we're dealing with humans, then we have to understand the nature of humans, and how we can adapt to everybody. And It's interesting. It's interesting to see like how things have evolved because I've been doing this for the last 8 years, and so even 8 years ago, it was so different than it is today. I literally had someone come up to me and they were like, "This will never be a part of our culture." Ever. Like, and I was like,
And
oh,
they were talking about law enforcement culture, I take it.
yep. Yeah. They
Mhm.
were like, this wellness stuff will never be a part of our culture ever. And they're like, but if you want to come in and volunteer your time and for free, like we won't say no. And I was like, okay, let's try it, And now 8 years later, we have robust wellness programs and we have podcasts where we exclusively talk about wellness in the public safety profession. It's incredible how much it's evolved, and I'm really excited for the future to see, how things progress over time. But I honestly, and I've said this a couple times, I'm calling it. I think that one day wellness, it's not going to be a separate silo. I think that wellness and training are going to merge together, and it's just going to be what you do, and it's going to be so normal.
Well, a component of any profession, not just law enforcement, public safety, whether it's fire, emergency management, emergency medical, is the way that you treat yourself, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally. As you said, I think we're getting there.
Hmm.
I work at the city of Gainesville. Like I said, I'm an elected official now, and the components throughout the city is not, oh, you're a engineer, and here's the wellness silo. No, you're an engineer, and we have these systems in place. Those systems can be financial advice, ability of where to put your monies on the financial side. They can be, we have a nurse on staff, right, for small minor things. That's very important to have medical care. You want an education? There's credits and ways that we can pay for some of your education. Most public safety nowadays, I am happy to say, typically has some incentives for further education and
Yeah.
further professional development. And what's more important than that than making somebody feel that they've got more credentials, they have more knowledge, they're more capable, they're more competent. And that's a component of wellness. So there is a lot of things, and I think the wellness, the term is broad, but really means is what are we doing to make sure somebody's completely whole, they're doing well, they're moving positively, And maybe like me, when they retire as a chief, and now I'm a reserve officer, and I'm happy to have that reserve officer badge. I'm pretty comfortable with that. And I like looking back and saying, I did some good things, and the support systems and the wellness systems really improved over time. So thanks for what you're doing there.
Thank you. I like that you've said this a couple times. You said, how do we make people feel whole? And, we hear the word holistic, and then some people are like, oh, and they roll their eyes and they're like, woo woo. But how can we spell it like whole? WHOL, holistic. We're just trying to make you whole. We're trying to figure out what are those things that we're going to do to make you feel complete, to make you feel good. And one of the things you brought up a few times is financial. I do want to dive into this a little bit because this is the one pillar, if you will, of wellness that I feel like is really
Okay.
emerging right now. It's one of the hottest topics across all agencies that I work with. Everyone is talking about the importance of financial wellness. And I would love your insights, maybe some tips and tricks that you've learned along the way, and how you think financial wellness impacts your overall mental wellness.
All right, so it's a good question because it was my weakness by far. Okay, I like to exercise. I have a family. I'm raising kids. I have plenty of interests. I'm in a Rotary Club, which does service. So I have plenty of other pillars and support. And at 21, as the youngest cop in Gainesville Police, I was only the youngest for a couple months, but I was the youngest. Um, Financial wellness and my financial well-being 40 years later, I didn't care. I was getting a paycheck. It didn't matter if it was 5 cents or $5 or 500. And the key that set me on a track that I feel very comfortable financially now is senior officers said, look, you can take in most agencies, you can take a tiny percentage of your paycheck, $5 or $10 or 15. I'm not minimizing it. And you can put that in almost every agency nowadays has it could be I'm not a financial guy, so I'm going to throw figures out and I may be wrong. A 401k, right? A 407b, and you won't feel it at all. But in 1 year, you're going to see it grew. It was tax deferred, which I learned. I knew none of these figures, just meant it affected me less. And then you put $5 extra the next year and $5 more the next year. And if you do that, you haven't impacted your ability to live on today at all. Yet by putting tiny amount of money, each paycheck aside, almost every organization does this. If there's one that doesn't, move. Go to one that does, because this is a key component, and you will find that you grow. What's the term? Nest egg. You will grow financial future. You're not even touching it. Meanwhile, you're making a salary. It's maybe a cup of coffee you're putting away a month. And I did that after 15 years in the job. I had done nothing. 15 years deep, the lieutenant said, that's it. You're going to start taking a piece of your paycheck and put it right here. It was a tiny amount. And fortunately, 15 years into the job, I still had 25 to go. So 25 years of putting a little money aside. And I'm like, unbelievable. And I did nothing. And I'm not a financial planner. So that's just one tip from a non-financial guy is take a tiny bit of your paycheck, put it aside in something. Ask the planner, ask your organization, ask a senior person, and I guarantee you'll be thanking, whoever gave you that advice, not me, but that financial planner or something 10 years from now and go, holy cow. And it makes you feel a whole lot more comfortable in the job if you have a financial future also.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that it's the way you described it sounded so easy and attainable. And I think sometimes when we think about wellness and preparing ourselves for the future, it feels hard. It feels maybe scary, or like it's another thing that we have to add to our plate. And for you to say, hey, all you have to do is this small little thing, and it's going to compound over time. I think that a lot of wellness is that way, and it doesn't have to feel overwhelming. It can
It's,
be,
it's, a, it's a good way to view it.
yeah, one foot in front of the other. Little incremental changes over time create big impact. How can we convey that message? And listen, I rubbed two pennies together for a really long time, and I understand the stress of having no money and realizing if my car breaks down right now, I am SOL. I am so like, I don't know what to do. I've lived off of instant pancakes until I got
Hmm.
my next paycheck. I understand the stress of that. And I think anyone who's listening can understand that. At some point in our lives, we've all been in a position where we didn't have that nest egg. And how does that add more stress to all of the other stress? And we know that relationships fail primarily because of money. That is one of the biggest reasons why relationships fail. And so, if we're going to try to set ourselves up for success, we're going to say that home wellness is important, then how can we just try to lighten that burden as much as we can? And you don't have to put your entire paycheck away. You can still
Yeah,
do the
the
things you want to do.
so law enforcement, anything that's in the public sector, government will pay less. But one of the great benefits, if you're in public safety and listening, is one of the great benefits is the benefits,
Mm,
right? So often the fact that we're lower paid and people may live paycheck to paycheck and you make your bills and there's very little left, like you're talking about for the crisis of the day, which may be your car broke down.
mm,
And the ways to do is you do start small with that. You do also recognize, at least I did, I thought, okay, I wasn't, I started it, I want to say it was 15,000 a year when I started, but it was a mint at the time, and it's gone up. And by putting a little bit aside, it helped. And then also just seeing the fact that it was making a difference over time made me probably a better budgeter. And believe me, you're talking to me about money, and this is my weakness. It's just not the area I'm interested in. But I see young officers and supervisors, and I say you've got to put something away now, and it will make such a difference. And then that plus the benefits that your organization provides, whether it's life insurance, health insurance. Maybe you get to the point, not many people make it to a pension nowadays. They just don't. But if you're fortunate enough to maybe go 20 or 25 years in the public safety profession, which is worth it, well, the pension is really something that is something also to look forward to because it does provide a measure of emotional well-being, right? And mental
yeah.
health.
One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately, in my personal and professional life is this idea of short-term discomfort for long-term gain. And I think that we've kind of had it reversed for a long time, especially as a society. There's a lot of
Mhm.
consumerism and it's like buy this thing and buy that thing. And so we're used to kind of sacrificing the long term for the short term, right? We want that instant gratification. We want the car. We want the purse. We want the like
I know I'm guilty
whatever
of
it
it,
is.
that's for
Me
sure.
too. Yeah, me too. And so I've really been trying to again like kind of reverse engineer things a little bit and ask myself and I think you have to be strategic in what it is that you're doing, but what are the things that I can do right now that cause me short-term discomfort for long-term gain? And I'll put this in a really simple example. So when I go to work out, I work out at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm not a morning person. I do not enjoy it. It's not my thing, but I tell myself this is short-term discomfort for long-term gain. I'm setting myself up for future, right? I'm going to feel better long-term. I'm going to have that physical longevity if I am uncomfortable for this hour at 5 o'clock in the morning when I don't like to do it. Such a simple example. We can apply this to a lot of different things. Maybe in the short term, we buy a used truck instead of a brand new truck. It's not necessarily maybe what you want to do. So we have this short term discomfort of maybe not driving the fancy new car, but we put that money away for long term gain. So, I think you can apply that concept to a lot of different things, but I've been
I think so.
trying to think about that lately of, okay, where are the things that I can maybe sacrifice now to make myself happy long term?
Yeah, it sounds like you're really kind of talking about that cliche called pinch points, right? What might be problematic for me now or a little more difficult. And the way you described it, Paige, you really described it as being a little more disciplined.
Yeah.
So Okay, there's finite amount of hours. I do not want to get up early in the morning, but if I want to be physically fit or just a little more healthy, so I have more energy, then maybe I'm working out before work because by 5 o'clock or six, I don't know about the officers working 12-hour shifts. The standard nationwide right now is 12-hour shifts. They have great advantages for both for the people working and the agency. One of the great disadvantages is they're mentally and emotionally and physically exhausting. They just
Mhm.
are. That's a disadvantage. So I think probably one of the pinch points that says the short term that you're going to do is, yeah, you have to, easy to say, you have to be a little more disciplined and rigid with your time,
Yeah.
where you put your time. And it's probably working out before or at lunch if that's allowed, meal break
Hmm.
or after. Exercise is one of the short term. You got to do it. That's a support. I don't know if it's one of your pillars, Paige, but I can tell you that physical health gives you more energy. It gives you more mindset. It makes you feel better. It's that adage: look sharp, feel sharp, be sharp.
Yeah.
That's an example. So I like the way you put that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't know if anyone's ever called me disciplined, so I appreciate that a lot.
Well, it
Um,
sounds like it in the way you described it.
thank you. I think that discipline over motivation all day long.
Mhm.
All day long. And it's hard to create habits. It's hard to create that discipline. But if we're waiting to feel motivated to do something, we're never going to do it. We're too busy. We're never going to wake up at 4 in the morning and be like, I feel like it. Today's the day. I feel like it at 4 a.m. It's not going to happen. It is that discipline and that consistency that you have to lean on.
You
Uh,
kind of provided me. If you could see inside my head right now, you'd see there's some gears working, maybe slowly, but they're working.
good.
And one of the other ones I was just thinking about is just education and professional development. Professional development, most people in public safety want it, and an agency that doesn't provide it, I don't care if it's costly, is short-sighting the agency and their people. I always say people over things. Value the people over the stuff, and you're in the right place. But education, most agencies nowadays too, kind of one of those things is if you if you have a degree, terrific. If you have a credential, terrific. If you want to pursue more, and then that's worth going back to school, whatever your degree is,
Mhm.
or getting a degree, and doing that because most agencies nowadays, most organizations, most cities will at least defray the cost. But it is one of those short-term pain because it's more time, it's more mental exhaustion potentially. It's but the long-term gain is you go like, hey, look how I've grown as a result. And so I think education is another one, whatever that might look like for someone in public safety.
I agree. There's something I want to dive into, but you just reminded me of something that I don't know if you have this like in your life. There's like these monumental events and there's these kind of things that you always remember. And there's this one specific event that I always remember and it helps me so much with my resiliency. And fun fact, I was a professional skydiver in my previous life, and I used to train military skydiving. And one of the things that I really wanted to do in my skydiving career was achieve a Guinness World Record. And so there's a lot of training that goes into this. There's a lot of camps, and you have to be hand selected, and the spot that you're put in really matters. And I was selected on one of the most elite spots in this formation, and I was so excited. We get to the actual world record, and it's days, and you're jumping multiple times within a day. It's very stressful. You're going high altitude, it's oxygen, you're
In a
so
whole
tired.
team,
Whole
like there's a whole
team.
team, right? And you're a piece.
There was like
Okay.
over 60 of us.
Wow.
And I remember after, because you get 3 days to do it. And if you don't get it on the last day, you don't get it. You don't always get this world record, right? And I remember looking at one of my friends who had achieved a world record before, and I was like exhausted. I was in tears, and I was like, I don't think I can do it. I don't think I can jump out of that plane again. I don't. And I remember them looking at me and they were like, Paige, it is not fun to get it, but it's really fun to have it. And like after that, I was like, okay, so I did it one more day. We achieved it. We got it. And now, and again, it goes back to that short-term discomfort for long-term gain, right? You said going back to school, getting your education, training for something that is really important to you. Now I can look back and I can always say, I achieved a Guinness World Record in skydiving. How cool is that? In the
That
moment,
is
not
super
cool.
cool, which
Not
is
in the
my
moment.
generation's term, by the way. So I'm glad
Super
you're
cool.
using the term cool. And you're
Yeah.
also the only skydiver, professional skydiver I think I've ever met.
Yeah, but it wasn't fun to get it. It wasn't fun to do it, but now, I look back and I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I did. And so
Mhm.
whatever that is for you, whatever those things are that you want to accomplish, whether that's a degree, having a family, like whatever those things are, it's worth the effort and the time for the achievement of that thing. So
Yeah, and you may not know until you, like you, I think you taught, you don't really know until you actually achieved it because getting there was maybe not quite as fun, right? Because
there
that's
was
where the
no
effort
fun.
was put. Yeah, my wife walked a marathon in Disney, right, years and years ago. Had some medical, physical health issues, and she said, "I'm going to do it." She trained with a friend. You always lean on friends. You want a support feller? It's family and friends. But she leaned on that friend, and ultimately, her training for that many months for a marathon was no bueno, which was not good.
Yeah.
And not, I felt her stress, and yet once she got it, we talk about it to this day how monumental that was.
100%. One of the things that you said that I really wanted to kind of circle back to was you said the importance of making sure your people know that you care and that they're valued. And you talked about the importance of positive reinforcement. So, can you talk a little bit about that? As a chief and in leadership of an organization, how did you reinforce positive behavior? How did you make sure that the people that worked with you understood their value?
So that's that term that I've actually used it. They've heard me say people over things. So you have to understand what allows people to do their job, their profession, the best way possible. So that's it. If you're a line officer, then you're a leader as a line officer for the other officers and to the community that you serve. If you're a sergeant or lieutenant or a chief or administrator, then you say, what am I doing to provide the things, the equipment, the professional development, the emotional and mental health and support systems for them to do their job in ways that when they go home, that they're feeling really good about what they did. One is provide professional development
Mm,
as a leader. You never go backwards. Trends change. Shoot, mental health and what we're talking about, wellness. The terms have changed, but now we know how important it is. So trends change all the time. Laws change. You have to know that. You have to understand what's use of force, for example, which has changed what we can do and what we can't do. So professional development is one way that you support any agency. And if the person gets professionally developed in your agency and they go elsewhere, there's a cliche for that and says, do you want an untrained person at your agency or do you want a well-trained person serving the community? And
mm,
I want that latter in that
yeah.
case. So that's one. The other one is just I like to rely on the way the cliches are truthful. And one is, you praise in public
Mm,
and you basically criticize in private. Both of those have exceptions, but you do make sure that true when people have expectations and they do things in good ways, they treat the community respectfully, professionally, they have an incredible investigation, they make an arrest that clearly has made our community safer. You make sure that they know you know it and that other people know. If it's a small thing, you say it in private. And then when you have to criticize, most criticism most is in private. There are some times where it's very important that you have to talk to a group. This is another way that you support your people. You do provide. From me as when I was a chief, my job was budget. It's so boring, and it's something I did not want to do. But I need to make sure my budget supports salaries, benefits, cutting edge equipment, training, the ability for them to do the things, good vehicles and things like that. So do that. And then another way you support your people is seed authority. Seeding, I can make every decision every time all day long, but that doesn't really help. You want succession planning? Make sure that people have the authority to know that what they do matters, that
Mhm.
they're professional, they're competent. And so seed authority every chance you get. That's delegation. That's give them the ability to make those decisions on their own and back them up. 95% of the time, those decisions are going to be solid. Maybe not what I did, but they're solid, right? They're good.
Yeah,
In many ways, to skin a cat and to make a good decision. So these are some of the ways that I think you support your agency and people, no matter where you're at in the organization. Be a leader as an officer, a dispatcher, a civilian, a sworn member, and support your colleagues that are around you so they can do a good job.
I love it. As you're talking, I'm really curious if, and maybe there's not just one, but what do you think is the most important leadership lesson that you learned?
Question or characteristic, or maybe it's two sides of the same coin. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Um,
whatever
I,
you want to share. I think for anyone who's listening, again, I said this in the intro, wealth of knowledge here, 40 years experience, a lot of that in leadership. And so what do you think is the most important thing that you've learned about leadership or the most important lesson that you've learned about leadership?
So leadership's foundation is built on ethics and integrity. This is, we have small margins for error in law enforcement and public safety. We make one mistake, even unintentional, it's magnified.
Yeah.
And people think, golly, that's representative of the whole profession. No, it's not. 99% of law enforcement and officers and deputies are doing the right thing all the time, right? And somebody makes a mistake and it's the end of the world. So we lead with ethics and integrity. I said that earlier, kind of that moral center. Start with that. No, if we're doing the right thing, do it. You have to take care once in a while in law enforcement, you have to take care of business. You may have to arrest somebody in a way that doesn't look, it's not, there's no police brutality. Sometimes it's not, it's messy. It doesn't look nice. It's a person who has victimized others and we arrest them. That's a good thing. So you back it. So I would say that kind of rounding about to your question is ethics and integrity is the most important characteristic, and leading with that is the way that you're centered, and that's being willing to admit mistakes. I've dropped the ball before, and my favorite, well, it's not my favorite line, it's probably my least favorite line, is to tell someone I dropped the ball. But that's typically what I would say, and it wasn't some intentional misconduct. It was just that maybe I missed a deadline or something. That's the case. Most mistakes are just that. They're things that we can recover from, and so we support our people in those ways.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I have so many opinions on I'm a perfectionist at heart, right? So for you to say like the hardest thing to say is I dropped the ball, I can relate to that because one, I never want to let anyone else down around
Me
me.
neither. I
Like
agree.
it's not even about me most of the time. It's like, man, I want to show up as the best version for you and I don't want to feel like I made a mistake. But I also think that when someone does that to me, when they own up to something and they say, "Man, I'm sorry. Like I missed that one," or I had an oversight here or there. I actually respect that a lot from other people, but it's so hard to do that yourself. But I think that we have to give ourselves and each other grace and understand that although I do think it's coming, we are not robots yet. Not everything is run by robots. And so we have to understand that if we were dealing with humans, that there are imperfections in our nature and we are never, ever, ever going to
There
be
sure is.
perfect. I think the pursuit of perfection is worthwhile, but I think it's a fallacy. I don't think that we're ever going to be perfect. And the moment that we think we're perfect, we stop growing and having the ability to see opportunities for growth. But I think that we have to understand that no matter what, we are going to fail. We are going to trip and fall. And again, it goes back to what we said before. How can we take ownership of those things and how can we get back up and how do we keep going and how do we grow from those things? And I have grown and learned so much more from dropping the ball and failing than I have from my successes, if I'm being completely honest.
I had a sergeant, one of my first sergeants, let's just say a real long time ago, who chewed me up and down. I'm very fortunate that all my rear end parts grow back over time. And he said, I don't know who you think you are, but right now these are the things you need to do to improve. And I had two paths. One path was do what I was continuing doing and maybe miss the big picture and not pursue professional development or do what he said and he provided that. And fortunately, I took his path and he's a chief elsewhere now in Florida. But you have to listen to people and understand mistakes are it's part of you. I think you mentioned it's really part of humanity. There
Mm.
are very few things in law enforcement we can't come back from. If we hurt somebody and it's intentional, there's no margin for that. That person has no business being in law enforcement. And everybody feels that. All good cops know you mistreat somebody, no business being in law enforcement. But mistakes or paperwork or something unintentional, we're in good shape there. And a lot of cops think that the public doesn't support them. I don't know if you were going to kind of cover this
Go for it.
page. The reality is, all vetted surveys, almost everything going back 50 years, shows general community support. Pew Research, look at anything you think might be that has done surveys over time and ask people, how do you feel about law enforcement? What do you think about public safety? Most of it supports what we do because what we do makes our community safer. It makes it a better place to live, a more vibrant place to live. And often, it kind of goes back to the question before we were talking about leadership really, it's important to make sure that our people in public safety know, you know what? Most people support you. So if you hear a percentage or a social media post or a viral Instagram something indicate you're not supported, realize that's not representative of most of our community, most of our neighborhoods, most of the people we live, work, and play with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know we're button up on time. Do you have a few minutes to spare?
I have whatever time you want because I know you're
Okay,
going to
cool.
chop
I
it up and make me sound articulate.
We're keeping the whole thing. I have two final questions for you, but kind of going back to what you said before about um budget and the things that you want to, provide for your organization. One of the things that, we talk about all the time is how difficult it is to incorporate wellness and training into budgets, especially as they're being cut over time. And I think the last couple of years have been especially hard for a lot of agencies out there. And you and I talked a little bit offline about this of how do you get these things done? How do you get these things into the budget? How do you provide these resources and these opportunities for your agency? What are some strategies and things that you've done that have been successful that maybe other leaders can learn from?
Okay. Well, so make no bones about it. Budget does define a lot of what we do in any organization, even public safety. Do I like that? No, of course, I can't stand that. But I think that's probably looking at things very narrowly. Wellness, mental health, emotional well-being, support systems, pillars, all the things we've talked about don't necessarily have to cost big money. So all cities and counties that I know of, they have gyms. Most of them have city gyms and community. If you're in a law enforcement agency and you can't work out, at low dollar or no dollar, a lot of times the organization will pay for that or provide. That's a low cost support wellness thing. And that fits within any budget because it's not going to come, it's not a line item. It's go to the gym. It's open these hours. How do we make that work? Extend the hours, for example, of the gym. If it's not meeting the needs of a 12-hour shift person, well, let's make sure it's open. What's the cost of that? Very little. Make sure it's open in ways that people can go even when they're working 7 days a week, like we do in public safety, 24/7, 365. That's an example, working out. Another good one is almost all organizations have internal professional development. and training. It can be as boring as Excel spreadsheets. It could be as exciting as how to motivate or increasing morale or educational incentives. And so take those classes because those are not impacting budget. Those are things available within the confines of most organizations. Reach out. I know Firstgevity in this case has a suite of services. I, by the way, am not selling for you.
Yeah.
I know they're going to know
Yeah.
that. I didn't even know whether you're a for-profit, not-for-profit, didn't matter. But the point is, you look and you see what can you do within the confines of what you have, and you don't have to do it all. Do the pieces that might be the biggest gaps, and look for innovative ways. Grant funding, for example. What a partner in the community. I have found that most nonprofits in the community I serve, they want to do things with law enforcement. So if part of that happens to benefit mental health, wellness, training, and teaching for my officers and my dispatchers and the civilians and the sworn that work every day, well, I'm getting that. And I'm
Mhm.
not worried about the budget because they're doing that they may be doing it for free, but they're doing it in ways that are really low dollar. And there's no dollar for dollar trade off in mental health and wellness. There's not. If you pay a dollar for that, you're getting far more than a dollar in value, whatever you're doing for that. We can't shortchange that.
Yeah.
I don't see it as much a budget issue. I see it as this is the way we support our agencies issue, and we look for innovative ways to provide the mechanisms that make our people the most successful and best that they can be.
Yeah. A lot of times I see that, and this is just my experience, that a lot of times it's a value issue instead of a budget issue.
That's right.
If you value these things, if these things are important to you, you'll make it happen. We'll figure it out. And of course there are some things that cost money and there's some things that don't cost money, but I think it's more of a question of, is this valuable to you? Do you think that there is an ROI on these things? Which obviously there is 100%. There's no denying or arguing that there's a return on investment by supporting your people. Your people are what keep things going. You can't have an organization without the people. So the ROI is there. Do you see the value? And then how can you get it done?
Agreed.
Love it. Last question is for the younger generation. And, we know that the men and women who are earlier in their career today are tomorrow's leaders. So, what words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
I don't know that I wish I would have learned earlier, but I actually have probably inadvertently weaved some of those things through our conversation today. And one is it starts. I've said it a few times, but you can't say no. So start by always being ethical and serving with integrity. That keeps you grounded, right? Second thing is make sure that you have interests and support systems. You've talked about it in a really good way, which is there's various pillars, but whether it's family, friends, exercise, mental health, interests, nonprofits, whatever you do, make sure you have some things that are outside the direct profession. It's totally okay, by the way, I think, to have plenty of your friends within the profession. That's natural and everywhere.
Mhm.
But that can't be your sum total of everything you ever do 24/7. There's got to be some things that give you perspective of what's happening. So have good support systems operate. I tell you, if you recognize what gaps you have, that look sharp, feel sharp, be sharp is a real thing. And you were trying, it's I may go to the gym, maybe I don't like the time that I have to do it or when I have to do it, but ultimately makes you feel better about what you're doing, makes you more competent, makes you more fit, makes you have greater energy. So look for things that allow you to feel that way. Exercise is just one of them. It could be going to a game night or joining an organization. Doesn't really matter. But get involved in something outside your profession to broaden your perspective. That's good for everybody. That was good for me as a 21-year-old, and it's good for me now as a good 62-year-old. You know.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing your wisdom and your perspectives. And Congratulations on your semi-retirement, and I'm really looking forward to staying in touch in the future.
I think anybody that's willing to listen to somebody who's just been doing it for 40 years on a podcast, I'm very excited about that. So thanks for taking the time and thinking of me.
Of course. Thank you so much.